the air. The Nigerian military posted video on social media showing what it says is its response to Saturday's attack in Monguno. That was followed by another attack in Ungazai, both the local government areas in Borno State in northeast Nigeria, where both soldiers and civilians were killed. A military spokesman didn't answer calls for comments on the attacks, but local reports suggest that dozens were killed and hundreds injured, with hospitals overwhelmed. Fighters are reported to have opened fire after arriving on motorbikes and in cars. Soldiers and a United Nations humanitarian center targeted. They're the latest major casualties in less than a week. On Wednesday, at least 81 people were killed when a herder's village was raided in Gubbio. A group of fighters called the Islamic State West Africa Province claimed responsibility for that attack. The group broke away from Boko Haram 4 years ago. Previously, Boko Haram was seen as closer to Al-Qaeda, but in 2015, leader Abu Bakr Sheku pledged alliance to ISIL. The Nigerian army has been battling Boko Haram for years as its fighters bombed churches and kidnapped schoolgirls. In recent weeks, army commanders claimed significant success against the group, but soldiers have often been outnumbered, under-resourced, and suffered heavy losses. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, and more than 3 million displaced by this fighting.
But we begin with a developing story, and word is coming in of clashes on the Chinese-Indian border. Beijing accusing India of crossing a disputed border between the two nations. This as the Indian army says 3 of its soldiers have been killed in those violent clashes. Beijing saying Indian troops crossed the border line twice on Monday and says that there have been casualties on their side as well. The deaths are believed to be the first in decades in a confrontation between the two world powers.
China has lodged strong protests and stern representations with India. We again solemnly request that India follows the relevant attitude and restrains its frontline troops. Do not cross the border. Do not provoke trouble. Do not take any unilateral action that would complicate the border situation.
Tensions between China and India had been on the rise for several weeks now, with each side deploying thousands of additional troops on either side of the border, leading to an increasingly volatile situation. Now, at the heart of this is a border dispute handed down from British colonial times, with neither Beijing nor New Delhi able to agree on where the demarcation between China and India actually stands. And over the past 70 years, there's been a war, there's been firefights and brawls, and this Tuesday it had been several decades since anyone had died during these confrontations. There's been over 20 rounds of negotiations to settle this issue. All of them have been unsuccessful so far. Beyond this border dispute, there's also a growing rivalry between two nuclear powers. On the one hand, China under Xi Jinping has been increasingly more assertive in its foreign policy and its territorial claims. We've seen this over the past few years, with China making sweeping claims on the South China Sea, with China exerting more control over semi-autonomous Hong Kong, and not excluding using force to achieve reunification with Taiwan. India, on the other hand, has been exerting more control over its border regions, with the building of roads and airstrips and shipping in of military equipment, all of this bolstered by its close relationship with Washington, D.C. So this latest confrontation is just the latest manifestation of this rivalry.
Has blown up an inter-Korean liaison office. It was located in Kaesong at the border. North Korea has made several threats against South Korea in recent days, including threatening to destroy the office, which was set up in 2018.
This is a very serious development. It's not completely out of the blue. They have been making threats for some time from the north against deteriorating relations. Of course, all of this comes against the background of stalled denuclearization talks between North Korea and the United States, which has impacted inter-Korean relations, with North Korea accusing the South of making matters worse and so on. So there have been increasingly threatening noises from from North Korea, and especially in the past week or so, they have been angered by the planned release by groups here in South Korea of defectors who had planned to release balloons with propaganda messages into the north. This has always angered the North Koreans. They have objected, making threats.
Under cover of darkness, North Korean defectors send aid and propaganda over the border. They're fighting against Kim Jong-un's ideology and sending food and medicine to some of the 10 million people the UN says are going hungry. The cross-border messages provoking an angry response from Pyongyang. Kim Yo-jong, sister of North Korea's leader, suggesting there'll be no more handshakes and smiles with South Korea's President Moon Jae-in. Instead, she's threatening military action if the South doesn't stop the defectors' campaigns. She told state media, "I believe our army will determine something for cooling down our people's resentment and surely carry it out." Kim Jong-un's sister is also an influential aide in his inner circle. She was at his side during talks with South Korea's President Moon. And later, when he met US President Donald Trump in their summit in Singapore 2 years ago. Analysts say it's the North's frustration with the US over those stalled denuclearization talks that's behind the escalating rhetoric. The North has cut off all communication with the South for the first time in 2 years, warning it of a regretful, painful time if it fails to control the defectors. In an effort to smooth relations, South Korea has tried to discourage the activists, taking legal action against them and saying earlier this week,
"We will continue to abide by all agreements between South and North Korea to maintain peace on the Korean peninsula and prevent incidental military conflicts."
Hasn't stopped the outbursts from the North, with choreographed protests against defectors Kim Yo-jong's described as human scum. The activists, though, are refusing to back down and say their campaign against the North will continue.
Linked to the Islamic State group have killed dozens of people in 2 separate attacks in northeastern Nigeria. Fighters reportedly gunned down 38 people in a raid on Saturday and set a truck ablaze, killing an unknown number of passengers in Goni Usmanti village. A second attack also happened on Saturday in the town of Monguno. Local sources have told AFP that 15 people were killed, including 9 soldiers. These attacks are the latest in a spike by fighters believed to be from the Islamic State West Africa Province faction. More than 80 people were killed by jihadists in a village in Nigeria's northeast last Tuesday.
The Sheikh Suri Mosque was packed with worshippers for Friday prayers when an explosion ripped through it, killing several people. According to the Afghan Ministry of Interior, the explosives were placed inside the mosque. Some witnesses say they tried to help the injured.
When I entered the mosque, I saw all the injured people. The imam was killed on the spot. We started to carry the dead bodies as well as the injured. And then they didn't allow us to go inside the mosque.
The Taliban has denied responsibility for the attack. The explosion comes days after another mosque in Kabul was targeted. The attack happened at a critical moment for Afghanistan. Peace talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government are closer than ever, some saying they'll start within weeks.